first speaker, keynote speaker, is Émile Bouchard from University of Montreal, Canada. He will speak about dairy herd health, a look at the veterinarian's changing role, and the future of One Health concept which exists, I guess, 10 years, and which might be the integration of, say, dairy herd health and public health in one way or another. Please, Émile, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Joss. Right, my topic is a look at the veterinarian's changing role, and it will relate to my experience, my life experience as a veterinarian, starting when I was a student, and I will go back to ancient age at one time, so bear with me. There won't be a lot of recipe on how to do herd health. It will be it will be more an evolution on what we have achieved and where we should go in the future, according to what I think. And according to what other, well, not only what I think, you'll see that what I think is submitted to other people's opinion. But the objective, I wrote a few sentences to just, so you keep in mind during my presentation what I had in mind while preparing this talk. So we all come from different countries, and in fact, 78 countries at this meeting today in Dublin, with different problems in our own countries and different levels of achievement. So I don't expect everybody to be at the same level. And what I'm presenting is basically our experience in Canada. We have things in common, though. Veterinary medicine and helping feed the world. And that is very, very, very present in our day, every day in our lives of veterinarian. And of course, we have to adapt to the new demand. We need to clarify our expertise within us as a profession and with other professionals and the public. And I don't know if this is common in many countries, but when I talk with veterinarians coming from other areas, the role of the veterinarian is often seen as the classical one that we all know, the person that waits at home until the phone rings, there's a sick animal, and then we rush and we treat the animal and we go back and watch football, and then wait for the next call. But I'm just summarizing. Like some people think that's what we do. We just do that. So the question would be, where do we stand as veterinarians? Where are we going? And what can we learn from each other? Each other being people from different backgrounds, different countries with different problems. So the past, and the subtitle is Epidemiologic Revolution. So I did a Master of Epidemiology, 1984-88, yes, with a residency UC Davis in California. And I know some people also did the same. I've met a few here at this meeting. So they might, I don't have pictures of that period, but so this is my background as a veterinarian. And I'm also a clinician at I was a clinician at the ambulatory clinic at the University of Montreal for many years, and now I'm doing more administration, but I still do herd check, and I have problems already that I brought with me in my suitcase because I have a client that is not fully satisfied to what we're doing right now, so it's important that I get back to him. And I will be talking about two people that were important in the perception that we have on our profession. And Thomas Samuel Kuhn, maybe some of you know, he wrote a book in 1962 about the perception we have of science. Samuel Kuhn is a physicist that turned historian and eventually philosopher of science. And he studied in Harvard and then started working in Berkeley, in California, for a few years, then went back to Princeton and ended up in MIT. So this is not a small career. It's an important man also, very known in the science business, I should say. So Thomas Kuhn introduced the word paradigm. In fact, it was a word that already existed, but he defined it a bit differently. So paradigm is, and I will read the definition that he gives, universally recognized scientific achievement that for a time provide model problems and solutions for a community of practitioners. And Kuhn argued in his book that science does not progress via linear accumulation of new knowledge, but undergoes periodic revolutions, also called paradigm shifts. And a paradigm shift is a fundamental change in the basic concepts and experimental practice of a scientific discipline. So of course, if I'm telling you all this, it's probably because I'm preparing you to a paradigm shift. But it happened a few years ago, so, and there might be another one, there will be another one, but I cannot predict when. Calvin Schwabe, I will talk about him a little bit more, but he adapted a little bit the Kuhn's theory and also mine. And this is from the article of Calvin Schwabe in 1982. The complex of self-perceptions, assumptions, underlying theories, and long and short-term goals, social and human motives, values, and other beliefs, together with the infrastructures, strategies, tactics, techniques, and other practices which members of any science currently share. So that would be a disciplinary matrix, and I will recommend Calvin Schwabe's article. If you want to look at the full matrix, I will have extract in my presentation of this matrix. Of course, it's a long sentence, and Calvin Schwabe wrote long sentences. I broke it down because I said, well, this is like a bit of a conception that we have a perception of what we're doing and what our science should be. And the researchers usually are the one that should be the first one to inform us or to be aware and be the first one to keep us aware of what there's something changing. And at the bottom, I wrote the next sentence, the next part of the sentence in blue, dark blue. It's more like, what do we do with all of this? We think we should be doing this. The research is going in that direction. This is where you should go. And who's doing it? Well, the practitioner is part of it. So I will be addressing mostly the practitioners in the room or the people that have to teach to practitioners, like I do. So, and of course, that not to say that there's arms over there, but also brain that comes with it. It's not only arm. Calvin Schwabe, well, was a veterinarian and professor at the University of California. He was the founder of the Department of Epidemiology and Preventive Medicine in California, UC Davis, and he passed away in 2006. Schwabe published 2 pivotal papers on the evolution of veterinary medicine. The first one in 1982, and it coincides with the first publication, the first journal of preventive veterinary medicine, so the first volume, first number also, and first page, in fact. So the current epidemiological revolution in veterinary medicine, part 1. So that was his first article in 1982. The second one was published in 1993, so 11 years later. I was always waiting for the next volume, but it came 11 years later. And in his first article, Schwabe defined 5 phases in the evolution of the science of animal disease management. That's how he called it. It was veterinary medicine. And I told you it would go to ancient age, but the first phase starts many, many years ago. And the paradigms at this time, you will see on the right column, the paradigm that Schwabe identified as being important for each of these phases. So I'll go, well, you can, of course, read some of them. Remember, I will come back with some of them later, but it's important to recognize that we built on previous knowledge. So recognition and treatment of signs, quarantine, slaughter of ill. Clinical diagnosis was introduced with the military phase between the 1st century and 1762. The third phase is a shorter one, veterinary sanitary police. So I think it will probably be, we can talk about the birth of epidemiology. So farm hygiene, slaughtering controls, and treatment centers. And it lasts until 1884. And if you know your history of medicine, 1884 is when the postulate of Koch was published, and Robert Koch published a postulate saying, well, there was four criteria that were needed to fulfill the postulate, but it's a relationship between one agent and one disease. So the paradigm at that time was based on, and of course, microscopes were available. Microbiology was developing. People recognized that there were some agents that were causing diseases that could not be seen before. And it was an era that we all lived with, because it ended in 1960, but when I started my vet school, all my professors, or most of them were, deans or whatever, vice dean, they were microbiologists. So they all work in microbiology because disease, the antibiotics, they were doing a very good job. So then the paradigms, there's a lot of them. There's 14 of them. So I highlighted laboratory diagnosis, and the 14th one, education. So, these are things that were developed during this phase. Now, and then what was new is Calvin Schwabe mentioned that there's a new revolution that was happening in the practice of veterinary medicine around the world. It was surveillance and selective actions. And he called it, there's only one paradigm that he has adjusted it in his second paper, but epidemiological diagnosis. So this is where we are. And just to remind you, in I did my MPVM in 1984. I told you, this is my first computer right there. Exactly the same. I remember it, and when I see it, I want to kick it. But it was very difficult to get it to work. One thing you learn using a computer like this one was do backups. You had to do backups. 2 floppy drives, 102 Ks, and I had it for 1 year, I think, a year and a half. But it was very useful when I needed to climb and get something. It was very sturdy and it was sad to put it to rest, but it was very sturdy. You couldn't break it. I tried many times, but it was difficult to use. And I showed that the statistics evolved at the same time. Data collection, we're all talking about data collection, computerized records, and I'll be talking about it, of course, and biostatistics, and all this evolved very rapidly starting in the end of the 60s, 80s, and now we live with it. But at this time, it was something that was changing rapidly. And Schwabe in 1993 said, I predict further that improved productivity of animals will be as active an area of veterinary medicine services delivery as our animal survival and health maintenance today. So that was, for that time, I think a big statement, but I think it's a reality right now. Just to take a message on this fast look at the past of our profession. So take-home message, veterinary medicine began a revolution in its application in the late 20th century, so the so-called epidemiologic revolution. A new phase of evolution appears gradually, so it's nothing, even though Kuhn said, it's a stepwise, a change of paradigm is a stepwise process, but it appears gradually. It's not appearing at the same time everywhere. And we always build upon previously acquired knowledge. So that's important, because I remember when I came back from my study and I was all hyped about, now the medicine will be this, it's not this. People didn't like it. People that were doing what they've been doing forever thought that I was trying to destroy what they were doing, which is not the case, of course. We're building on what other things are done. And the successes of the previous phase are retained. So, of course, the successful ones will be retained. The present now. Present is herd health, evidence-based medicine, and models and decision-making. So I'll be talking about this. The epidemiologic revolution led to herd health medicine, population medicine, the so-called population medicine. So computerized health records management became common. I put a few names here, Derricom, Derrichamp, the ESA-HR, which the ESA-HR is an experience, that we had in Canada, in the province of Quebec, with practitioner. And I will say a little bit about it because I think it's important, because we did the right thing, I think, so it's okay, I can say it. DSAHR, it's an acronym for Animal Health Record, but we built with practitioners, and there are some in the room here, a system, a network, in fact, and what was nice is the practitioner invested in the project. They invested close to $1 million Canadian dollar at that time, which was a lot of money, to build a herd health system. And it lasted 3 years. Of course, they didn't know how to use computers. It was 1989, so they had to buy a computer. We started when we met with them 13 times during the 3 years. we listen to them, and they listen to us also, because we're giving them some background information in epidemiology and why when you analyze data, you need to have a numerator, denominator, what are all the epidemiology terms that you need to learn to be able to be confident what you do. The last 3 years, and after that, well, the software is still used, and the teamwork is still going on. There is less university involvement now, but there was 3 people from the university, 3 researchers involved, and we worked together in establishing this system. And then afterwards, well, at the addition of production data was added to the health records, and this is pretty much seen worldwide, because like Calvin Schwabe said, evaluation of productivity is important, as well as disease control. And then, well, we start collecting data, of course, and data does not equal knowledge, as you know, and understanding the distinction between data, information, and knowledge is necessary to bridge the gap also between big data and evidence-based medicine. So I'll be talking a bit about big data. You're probably familiar with this concept. Well, you should be, because Google uses it every day, and to know what you want to eat tonight and things like this. So we might be able to use it to detect new diseases and problems in animal population. So evidence-based medicine, you're familiar with this too. So the importance, of course, is to be able to make a decision based on evidence. So the present, well, we have car records, diagnosis, treatment. This is what we do with our computers on the farm. We collect data. And then what we did after our project in 1990 was to be able to compare herds within them. So to be able to act at a different level, the upper level, we're able to compare cows in between them, which one is the best one, but very difficult to compare herds because they're multifactorial, a lot of factors. So you have to build, to calculate algorithms to be able to evaluate herds. It's not something that we learn, at least at the vet school. We know how to do a clinical diagnosis on a cow, but we never learned on a herd. So this is basically what we did. So evaluation of the herd, calculation of disease prevalence, and performance of the herd. So this is the second level, and this is what we're working on now, and we're collecting data and trying to build evidence based on what's collected. So this is what veterinary practitioners and producers do on their day-to-day basis, exchange at these 2 levels, the cow records and the herd level. And of course, data becomes information when we treat it. So that's where we need the people that will build the algorithms, do the research to tell us this is how you should measure disease, this is how you should evaluate the herd. I'll go very quickly on the epidemiological methodology. It's something that you're probably familiar, but the basis is hypothesis testing. And I put it there because it relates with big data, which you don't have, probably, you don't need all this to do big data evaluation. And of course, the study types that we know. And of course, what Schwabe was also saying is that eventually the practitioner will master all these techniques to be able to evaluate subpopulation in a herd, be able to understand the numbers you get, because it's not a raw number, it's always a number that was calculated most of the time. So it's important to have a good feeling on the time period you're looking at your algorithms or your indices you're calculating on a herd. It's important to know which population is at risk, which is not, and things like this. So this is why when you compare 2 systems, evaluation of, let's say, number of cows pregnant, percentage of cows pregnant, well, you might have different numbers because they're not looking at the same population, and depends on. So these are the basis of our evidence-based medicine, the mindset associated with evidence-based medicine. Oh, and this is just about evidence-based medicine, what it is. Maybe you're familiar with it, but data analysis using epidemiological methods will give the information and knowledge needed to make decisions and practice evidence-based medicine. So the goal here is to make decisions, and we will base our decision on the best information we can get, and based on evidence also. And the practice of medicine should be based on evidence. That's why there are some aspects of treatments that we don't discussed very much because we don't have the evidence that it's working. So we try to stay away of beliefs and opinions. So even though something might sound very good, I could sell you a very good product to treat mastitis, and I can explain that it comes from whatever, but you will probably eventually, what you need to know to make a decision is to have evidence that it's working. Just a few examples of what we can do with the data and evaluate it, and just take you to what I think is kind of important to me, but calculating risk factors. So by now you know the disease is not like it was one factor, one disease, it's multifactorial. So people are interested in calculating risk factors. So I put here an article, a recent article in New Zealand, and just the risk factors that were used, just to give you an insight. So risk factors studied included age, breed, length of dry period, farm, herd size, yield, and individual somatic cell count, status, 30 to 60 days before the end of the previous lactation, rainfall at calving, and number of calving on the same day. So you can see it's quite specific. So if you're going to use these risk factors, you probably have to measure them. So if you work in an area where you don't measure, well, rainfall, useless. But it might have an influence, and you could correct, and this is all the epidemiological methodology, you can correct for certain aspects, certain risk, some risk factors. So this, of course, should lead you to a model, because you would like eventually to predict what is the risk of having mastitis for a cow in your herd. And I'll show you another example that we've done in Montreal, where we calculated risk factors associated with first service conception risk. And this is, I think, the risk factors should be useful to be able eventually to predict what will happen with a cow. So the factors that we evaluated was lactation rank, so the proxy of the age of the cow. So lactation 1 was the baseline. No effect on first service conception risk if a cow was first lactation. And then a decrease of 1.1, decrease of 3.4 when the cow gets older. We look at production, also production level. So the cows that had the highest conception risk were the one that was producing the least, so less than 7,500. And the high producing cows above 10,000 kilo, well, there was a decrease of 15% on their risk of conceiving at first service, first insemination. Diseases have an impact, as you might expect. So, of course, we look at all the disease that can happen before the first service. And metritis was the one with the highest decrease in risk in conceiving. And we go on, so on and so on. Lactation stage, well, this is the last one. Early lactation, the cow is less receptive, so we'll have a decrease, higher decrease. There should be a minus sign here, minus 6.4 for cows below 60 days in milk. To all these numbers at lactation stage, you put a minus except for 0%. So we all this information, and now we can look at a baseline conception risk. So we had the baseline, cow lactation 1, no effect, no disease, no effect, less than 7,500 kilos, no effect. So these cows conceived with the conception, with 54% conception risk. Now a cow was an old cow, lactation 3. She had a retained placenta and was producing 9,000 kilo. Well, then she would have combined risk decrease of 3.4 plus 2.5 plus 7.2. So her conception risk, expected conception risk should be 48.9. So you shouldn't be worried if you don't get 54%. You should be worried if you get less than 40%. So that's so each cows were not created equal. So we look at risk factors. And that's something you can include in a software that will calculate it after forever. So you just plug in the diseases of the cow, and you don't even need to plug in if you have a good health record. It's already in there, so it's calculated, and you can have an expected conception risk with those cows. I put a model here, and that's when I was a student, I was reading about models that would predict the risk of having a disease. I thought it was interesting. Until you realize that your risk is 90% of dying in the next few days. But this one, heart disease risk calculator, it's on the web. You can use it. And you enter your age, your gender, whatever. There's a few pages of that. A few things that maybe you don't have with you, your pressure, things like this, and you come up with a value. This is for the next 10 years. They don't expect me to have a heart attack now. 50% is quite high, I think, but I think just before the meeting here, just before my speech, it was probably closer to 50%, but now it's decreasing. So, and they tell you could decrease your risk of having a heart attack to 12% if you do things. For me, I have to, is it worth trying to control my risk factor? It's eating vegetable, basically. That's what I should do. That's what they tell me to do. So it's okay. I'll try to increase my vegetable and decrease my beef consumption. Now the model to be created, I've copied it a little bit. It does not exist. But the conception risk calculated for a cow, we could have just plug in the data. The cow that we have, she had dystocia, RP, or yes or no, and go on the pages on there and then calculate the conception risk. So she should, her risk of conceiving at first service is 34%. And it says you could improve to 42%, but there's a few factors that you cannot change, the age of the cow and things like this, but there might be a few things you want to change, increase. So it's good on an individual cow, but it's even better on a herd level. So this can be done. You have a list of cows, you all have their diseases and everything. You can evaluate their risk, and then you do a mean for the herd. And we've done that. So you go to a dairyman, and you tell him, well, you don't like your conception risk at first service, but you have so many diseases, so let's work on the most important risk factor and try to decrease it, and then your conception risk will go up because you're really in the values that you should have. So models to me are very interesting. It's always trying to have a number that will help you make a decision fast. And of course, if you have to go through every time and calculate everything by hand, impossible. To do it even on a computer, Excel sheet, impossible. You have to have someone that really thought about it and looked at it and say, well, this is how we should evaluate it, and then plug it in a software and calculate it for you as long as you believe that it's based on evidence, right? It has to be evidence-based medicine. So this is where we're going. So I'm saying this is the present, and it is. And you have to be careful of my time. And I also, so another example of economical models also that we can build, because people want to know, will I save money? Who's costing me money? What's happening? So it's of course, as veterinarians, we do not always have the background to do economical models. So we did this study with people from University of McGill, College McDonald, and Montreal, animal science people. So there's a group of veterinarians with animal science people on this paper. It's not published yet, but it will be published soon. So it's a study conducted in Canada combining health and production data to evaluate lifetime profitability of a cow. And of course, the goal was to be used by producers eventually, or veterinarians, so we can we could compare cows within a herd, compare cow cohorts in a herd, and eventually compare herds versus a benchmark, which could be other herds. And this is what a few of the results. I have two graphs, and this is comparing two herds, and each dot is a cow, so there are some repeated measures here. And the X scale is the age of the animals in months. So starting at first calving, around 25, 24 months of age, and then looking at the margin over variable costs for two similar herds. So the herds had to be similar based on nutrition, based on average cow production and things like this. So one is doing a lot better than the other one. As you can see, the one on the orange one is about 10 months of difference between the two herds to reach the break-even point. And now this comparison, now the same study, these are two cows, just it's the same, it's the lifetime profit margin for two cows with similar margin over feed costs. So the one on the left, the red cow, the break-even point is the line, at 0. So the break-even point happens a lot earlier. So this cow pays good payoff. So she's a more profitable cow than the one on the right. In this evaluation, they've included disease information. And you can see also that when the cow is dry, well, there's no income. So sometimes even, well, slight decrease in income. So, so this is a way of calculating for each cow, making a model or profitability, and doing it for a full herd, combining disease, production data, and economical value. So we've added, so we start with disease data, we've added production data, and now we added an accountant or an economist, someone that is good with numbers. So then we come up with combining different studies and different information to evaluate the cow value. So that were my example of what we can do as a veterinarian, and what the data we collect on the farm on a cow eventually can give us as information to make better decisions. Now, President, you will hear about big data, and this is a group of veterinarians in England and UK, but they're small animal veterinarian, most of them, and they met last March. It's very recent. And their goal is to look at the use of large volumes of anonymized health data for research and surveillance, which makes sense in small animal also. Most of the small animal practitioners live or the small animal will live either in cities, in areas with their owner, and there's a lot of data concerning breed, what they eat, whatever. So a lot of information in each of the clinics, but the thing is to get all this information together, and then you accumulate so much data that you can make decisions and maybe relate animal health with human health in populations. So, and their goal is to identify new diseases and risk factors. And this is a group of veterinary practitioners, owners, diagnostic laboratories, and practice management software companies. So really 4 distinct group of people, and that's, I think makes it interesting that you don't just have a bunch of veterinary practitioners that can talk about big data, but when you have a practice management software company that's in there, and maybe an owner that brings his comments, I think it's important and interesting. So something to follow up. So big data are distinct, that's a way of putting it. Big data are a distinct cultural, technological, and scholarly phenomenon centered at the application of machine learning algorithms to diverse large-scale data. So basically, it's a black box. You put a lot of data, and you get something out of it. So in contrast with evidence-based medicine, big data usually does not involve protocol-directed data collection. So for the people that don't like epidemiology, this is for you. So more and their dictum would be more data are better than better data. So the more you get, the more you will get. Big data offers expanded research power, especially for studies aimed at classification, prediction, modeling, and simulation. I was going to say stimulation, but it's simulation. Knew a vet that could not say simulation. He always said stimulation, and now I have his disease. And this is the study in blue, the traditional designs, and in yellow will be the big data method. So you can see that there are things that you don't do with big data, but you can classify, predict, and look at causal learning. And the president, well, One Health should probably finish. Well, the president now on One Health. It's summarized by, this is the American Veterinary Medical Association's definition that they put in 2008. The collaborative effort of multiple disciplines working locally, nationally, and globally to attain optimal health for people, animals, and our environment. And I put an article here, One Medicine, One Pathology, Are Veterinary and Human Pathology Prepared? And they claim that the last sentence, but that both domains have paradoxically parted ways, leaving the discipline of pathology poorly positioned to contribute to contemporary science. So this is probably, I don't know if it's a pathologist that signed the article, probably, but it's not very positive. So they were looking at, what should we do we could, in fact, we could have the same conclusion in what we're doing. Are we prepared to contribute to One Health? Good question. maybe we could come up with the same answer. And Calvin Schwabe in the 1993 article was a bit deceived about the implication of veterinarian in preventive veterinary medicine. And he claimed that there was not enough communication between people that knew epidemiology and people that were not familiar with epidemiology, so things didn't go as fast as he wished. And the One Health concept, you see in this article, they mentioned Calvin Schwabe, that is one of the veterinarians that talked about it in the recent time, but it's a concept that was established by William Osler, the human medicine doctor from Montreal, University McGill, Montreal. William Osler studied 3 months with a veterinarian. And he started his study with a veterinarian, and I think it's Duncan McEachran that you're talking about, a Scottish veterinarian that was established in Montreal 150 years ago. The first vet school in Montreal was established by a Scottish man, Duncan McEachran. So they're all part of the comparative medicine and the concept of One Health. So I think veterinary medicine was involved early on. I'm coming back to what we're doing, veterinarians are doing. And also, well, we'll look at pathologists or people doing clinical pathology or people working in laboratories looking at diseases a different way. So I told you that we collect data, we get information, and people that are on the top of the pyramid, there were space for 2 more groups of people. So at a national level, the public health and zoonosis control, people, I should say also animal disease control, and not only zoonosis, but at the national level, they work at a macro level, and they try to go to the micro level, where the cow I stick at the bottom of the pyramid, but the people looking at diseases are on the top of the pyramid, making decisions. They're the one that have the concept and how we should do it, and then eventually they will end up at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So government agencies, and we also in some areas we do have in Quebec, association groups of producers and association that will work on biosecurity and disease control. And they're very concerned now with some contagious disease spreading from herd to herd. So these people, of course, are just, they will give also information at the national level, but they're really closer to the micro because it's a group of producers usually. So when these 2 parts of the pyramid, the future, in fact, what I foresees the 2 parts of this pyramid will join, and the data that collected on the farm will be used at the regional level and at the national level. Then the value of the data collected by veterinarians will increase more and more, and that's what's happening right now in Canada. Because we built a system with practitioners to be able to collect data at the farm level, to have knowledge, to be ready to answer, to be present when needed. So when a government will come up with a program that we need to do this and that, well, you don't have to start again. All cows have their record, it's computerized, a unique number, easy to start. And just to finish, my main concern now, I'm working let me go back, on a center of expertise. So a solution to consider, and we're doing right now, proposal to the industry and to the government to make connections. So making connections is all about, there's 3 groups that are important: the producers, the farmers, the university and research, and the resources, the veterinarians, the practitioners, and the diagnostic lab. Usually, university and veterinarians will work together. We're responsible for the training of the veterinarians, and their training when they're done, continuing education, and also in developing sometimes some programs to help them control diseases or work on a farm. The veterinarians, of course, interact with the producers because they offer services, and the laboratory diagnostic also. So these are all links that are done naturally. And universities sometimes with producers, because producers might invest or through government or to their own money to do research or for innovation or to seek innovation. So, or just consultation also. So I think the 3 parts of the triangle are important. And these, we think there's a lack of efficiency of having all the people, the veterinarians talk to the producers talk to the university, and then the veterinarians talk to the university and goes back and forth like this. So what we're working on is having a center of expertise in the center of all this, have the producers work with the veterinarians, laboratory diagnosis, and the university. So it's faster to get the information across, it's faster to get the people mobilized and to work on project. And of course, innovation in this case will be closer to what's needed because we don't have to wait until someone publishes what are the goals of the funding. So it's important. And of course, at the regional and national area, which covers all this, well, it's important that they invest in this system like this. And I've put here, if funding increases, well, the center of expertise will be, and the university research also will be better, the improved innovation and consultation, and the better training and better programs, and in some areas, well, the government wants to create programs to help control diseases, and of course, the services will be better for the practitioner. So, and more profitable producers. A friendly reminder to myself, one of the things I said at the beginning was that we're not at the same level of achievement. I've presented things, the evolution that I foresee and I've seen also. And a friendly reminder, and I've put an article, weak internet connectivity in rural areas hindering agricultural production. Because it happened to us, you sell a big system and your computer, where do we plug it in? Well, electricity not working well, we don't have internet. Or if they have it, it's so slow you won't do it. So you have to adapt your tools, your structures, what you're doing to the situation you're living with. And we are influenced, like it was said at the beginning, by the evolution of science, technology, self-perception. Self-perception is important, and our surrounding worlds. What's the pressure? I mean, in some areas of the world, the clients might have something, the public might have something, other areas they're more difficult. It all depends, the pressure of the public is important too.
Can you conclude here?
Yep. So yes, we can diagnose disease, and these are things we can do. We can record our diagnosis and treatment, we can record outcomes. We can all do this as a profession, and so on and so on. And the question is, but does it pay? Is it economically viable? And some practitioners ask me sometimes, well, yeah, I heard health, but I don't want to do it because I'm not sure I can earn a living doing it. Well, it pays for who? It has to pay for the producer first. The producers, and they see benefits, I'll tell you. So they see benefit of having a veterinarian that knows about their herds. It can make decisions based on what's happening on the herd. Does it pay the veterinarian? Well, that's for you to answer. The public, represented by the government, well, if you go to a system where you can control disease more efficiently, yes. And the world population with whom we want to exchange, well, of course, healthy. There will be a lot more exchanges in the future than we expected. So my short answer is yes, because Joe just wants me to leave. And take-home message, we participate in a system to feed the planet, and that's easy. The action starts at the farm level, veterinary services information. Veterinary practitioners have to raise their actions at the herd level. Veterinary practitioners have to participate in the decision-making process at the macro-micro levels interface. And that would be my triangle where I had the government and groups, association, and the herd and cows. So there's normally veterinarians don't really need to go above that unless they're consulted, but it's important now that this barrier disappears. Practitioners have to put themselves in a position to collaborate, data, communicate information. Government, public health officer, researchers, and farmers will recognize the values of your actions as a practitioner because you'll be prepared to what's coming. Thank you. See you in Sapporo. See you in Madrid. And maybe some of you know, but I've been president of the WAB for an hour and a half or 2 hours. So I put the mission here, and it relates to what my talk also. So the mission of the World Association for Buiatrics, in case you don't know it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Émile, for this overview and vision. We have 1.5 minutes for questions. That means 1 or 2 questions. Those of you who want to raise a question, please go to one of the 4 microphones in the alleys. In the meantime, I could raise a question about your triangles and the position of the practitioner. What is the reason behind the fact that you are not positioning the practitioner also at the level of risk management and risk prevention on the farm?
Yeah, well, he is. You mean the triangle with the center of expertise, or the...
No, the earlier ones.
Yeah, well, some veterinarians are working, yeah, they're working at all levels normally. The levels of, yes, they're working there, but not as practitioners. I was talking about more the practitioners on working with the cows, works with the farm, and normally it's a different veterinarian working at the risk factor management and all these things, but...
Okay.
I don't know if that was your question. But
Yes. Are there questions from the...
they have to be there, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Micha Schultz, UCD. We all know that at the moment we have too much milk on the market. I'm just wondering if we still need to push into high production and so on, or maybe we should think a little bit more about the quality of the food that we produce for the planet. I'm just wondering what's your thoughts about that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, well, producers will do what's viable for them, and we live in an economy, an economy that if you don't make money, you don't do it. If people are ready to pay for a certain milk, I think there will be people to produce it, and we're involved in this decision too. And so we have to be part and make sure that everybody gets what you want. But it's a market decision, basically, the way I see it. We can, of course, education is important. If veterinarians should not promote milk that is not good for people's health, and I think they're not doing this. And antibiotic control is important, and I've seen some countries where the laws are not what they should be. And that's where veterinarians should be involved in getting better laws to make sure that things are done properly. But I'm not sure if I answered your question. Now, too much milk, reduction. I come from a country where there is a regulation, but we know how much we'll produce next year, ballpark.
Okay, thank you again,
Thank you.
Émile, for your presentation.